Welcome to Faith is the Podcast. I've been thinking a lot about this idea of inherent value. Like we talk about it a lot, but just how powerful is that concept?
Yeah, I think it's really foundational. I mean, especially when you consider, the Christian belief about salvation. It's like this amazing gift, priceless, really. It speaks volumes, about our worth.
Exactly. Like it's such a powerful reminder that we are valued. And, it got me thinking how that connects to this idea of attractiveness. What actually makes a person truly attractive?
Oh, that's interesting. So often, we get caught up in just surface level stuff, like physical beauty and all that.
Yeah.
But there's got to be more, right?
Right. And before we dive into that, I want to take a quick moment to thank our sponsor for this deep dive, Business Referred. They're all about supporting local businesses with, smart advertising strategies. If that's something you're interested in, definitely check them out. Shoot them an email at info@businessreferred.com. Now, back to this whole attractiveness thing. Our listeners are people who, want to go deeper, so let's do just that.
Absolutely. One of the sources we're looking at today is from Kingsley Okonkwo, and he makes a great point about differentiating beauty from attractiveness. It's like beauty, what we often see first, right? That fades. But attractiveness, that's more like charm. It has staying power.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
So how does he define that, this deeper attractiveness?
Well, he talks about it in Proverbs. He says, beauty is fleeting, charm can be deceptive, but a woman who fears the Lord, that's who gets the praise. So it's really pointing to something deeper than just outward looks.
Interesting. So if beauty is, like, more on the surface, what's this deeper attractiveness all about? What's it rooted in?
One of the first things Okonkwo points out, and I think this is so key, is self-esteem.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like, if you don't value yourself, how can you project that, outward attractiveness?
Exactly. And it's interesting how he defines self-esteem. He says it's your own evaluation of your value. It's how you see yourself, not necessarily how others see you.
He uses this great phrase, it's like you write your own check. Because so often, don't we base our worth on, what we achieve or what others think?
All the time. But real self-esteem, it has to come from within. And, he gives that example from the Bible, the Israelite spies who saw themselves as like grasshoppers. And guess what? That's how they appeared to others too.
Wow. Yeah, that's a powerful example. Like, our internal view really does shape things. So where does it leave us? Where do we find this solid self-esteem?
That's the big question, right? And the source really hits on this. You can't base it on, things you have or how popular you are, because that stuff changes and needs a foundation that doesn't, disappear.
And this is where Okonkwo brings in his idea of the 7 laws of value, right? Like principles that inherently give something worth, us included.
Yes. And one of those principles, he talks about price. And this is where it all connects back to, what we were saying at the beginning about salvation. We were bought with a price. Think about it. The price of Jesus' sacrifice, that's huge. That tells you something about our value.
Absolutely.
Mm.
And, it's like if we can grasp that, if we can understand how much God values us, that changes everything. It shifts our whole perspective. It's not about what we do or what we have. It's about that relationship. And the source emphasizes this. You are God's own.
Right. And the owner's value affects the value of what they own.
Yeah, I like that. It's like even like a simple object becomes more valuable because of who it belonged to.
Exactly. And another law of value, he mentions rarity. There's only one you. Your fingerprints, your DNA, you're a one-of-a-kind creation.
That is so cool to think about. And I think that's crucial for building self-esteem and then attractiveness. Like knowing that nobody else is exactly like you, it's freeing, isn't it? No more comparing yourself to everyone else.
It really is. It lets you embrace what makes you, you.
Now, Okonkwo also talks about another big part of attractiveness, being a giving person. Which, in our world that's often focused on me, might seem counterintuitive.
It does, yeah. But I think it's about shifting your focus. Like instead of being all about your own needs, you start thinking about others.
And that's what's attractive.
Yeah.
You have that outward focus,
Yeah.
that willingness to, like, invest in others. He calls it being a blessing.
Right. And he quotes that verse, it is more blessed to give than to receive. And it's not about like these huge gestures. It's the little things, everyday kindness, being generous, being polite.
I love that story he shares about the red carpet interviewer. She was so kind to this, nobody artist, and it ended up opening doors for both of them.
Yeah, it shows you, like, kindness shouldn't be about getting something back. It should just be who you are.
Absolutely. And the source points out, sometimes we might benefit from things we didn't do, but we always reap the rewards of what we sow. So living a generous life, that creates true attractiveness. So for you listening, here's the takeaway. Real attractiveness, it isn't about fitting into some, temporary beauty standard. It's about cultivating that inner sense of worth, knowing your value, and then being kind, being generous to those around you.
And if we remember what we talked about at the beginning, knowing how deeply God values us, that can be the biggest motivator. Let that value shape how you see yourself and how you interact with the world.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. How can you, purposefully develop these inner qualities, this self-esteem, this generosity, and how will that impact your life, your relationships, your work, everything?
That's a great question to consider. Like, what kind of legacy do you want to leave?
That's all the time we have for this deep dive into faith.
This was really thought-provoking.
Thanks so much for listening to Faith is the Podcast.